Southern Alberta, a land shaped by contrast and resilience. Here, endless prairies stretch beneath open skies, while the Rocky Mountains rise in silent watch to the west. It is a place where nature runs wide and history runs deep, a landscape that has long called to settlers, dreamers, and builders. In the late 1800s, that call would be answered by a force that would forever alter the course of the region, the Canadian Pacific Railway. It would link isolated settlements to the outside world and gave rise to towns that would become vital hubs of agriculture, trade, and industry. Join us as we take an expedition across southern Alberta to explore various subdivisions across the massive network of CPKC, from lines long abandoned to modern busy main lines, from prairies to the foothills of the Rockies. This is CPKC, Rails of Southern Alberta. The massive rail hub of Calgary is often the first to come to mind when one thinks of railroading in Alberta. Rightfully so, since it hosts the corporate headquarters for CPKC, as well as routes spanning every direction out of the city. Returning from a trip north of the city, local train C55 is seen on the final approach to Alyth Yard in Calgary. As it sweeps along the curve, we are set up for the C55 at Nose Creek Park, situated not too far from Calgary's International Airport. This is along the Red Deer Subdivision, which runs north out of the city towards its namesake. C55 is returning from a trip north to Didsbury, where it has just served a propane loading terminal. Leading the charge is a pair of EMD Jeep 20C-Ecos. The Canadian Pacific would order 130 of these rebuilds that primarily came from first-gen diesels such as GP9s. Debatably the most well-known route out of Calgary traverses west out of the city. Deemed as the Laggan Subdivision, this route leads freight towards one of the toughest battles in North American railroading. With the skyline peaking above the hills in Beaumont Park, CPKC Train 401 is seen cruising over the twin bridges that stand above the Bow River. This manifest's journey has only just begun, as it is westward bound for Coquitlam, British Columbia. By the time that the sun sets, 401 will be in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, enduring tough terrain that still gives modern freight trains a formidable challenge. While we will be returning for a full production of the Laggan Subdivision and its scenic right-of-way, we now will shift our attention as we travel further south in Alberta. The average traveler may find the journey between Calgary and Lethbridge to be a drag, with its seemingly endless fields, but history enthusiasts will find the region is filled with rich lore. Along Highway 2, one will find a few signs of a railroad that is now long gone. Grain elevators once served by the Canadian Pacific are a common sight throughout the small towns along the route. In Claresholm, the depot still stands and acts as a museum and community center. Built in 1912, many of the bricks used in its construction came from the original Calgary station that was dismantled in 1910 to make way for a much larger one. A caboose remains on display, reminding locals and visitors alike of a bygone era of Claresholm. At one time, the CP Macleod Subdivision ran right through here to transport passengers and assist in the local agriculture industry. The line ran from Aldersyde to Fort Macleod, both of which still host main lines. The tracks were pulled in 1999, while now only a handful of remnants hint at what once was. While the Macleod subdivision is a distant memory for many, the Aldersyde subdivision still is very present in everyday life. Running between Calgary and Lethbridge, this route only sees two guaranteed trains a day, the 418 and 419. 419 is seen southbound near Barron as it closes the gap to Lethbridge. An entire consist of KCS and KCSM power makes up the 419 today. Very small pockets of snow and ice remain at Lundbreck Falls as we are several weeks into the spring. Paired with a relaxing view over the limestone canyon, the twin waterfalls plunge around 12 meters into the pool below. Nestled above the waters is the Crowsnest Subdivision, a popular route for rail fans as it glides east to Lethbridge from the foothills of the Rockies. Canadian Pacific 9727 is leading Coal Train 816. Originating out of the Sparwood coal mines just past the border to British Columbia, it has a long journey in store as it is bound for Thunder Bay along the east coast of Ontario. Despite being out of the massive mountain ranges, the grades are still difficult for the coal train as it climbs up and down the foothills. DPU motors in the middle and rear are required to assist. Following along the Crowsnest Sub, 9727 is now east of the hamlet of Lundbreck as it winds under Highway 3, the Crowsnest Highway. The 9727 will be turning 23 years old this December. It is a General Electric AC-44 locomotive. Unlike several others of its model type, the Canadian Pacific never rebuilt the 9727. But what really caught the eye of our group were the bathtub freight cars hauling coal. At one point, there were countless sets of these gondolas running from the mines of Sparwood to customers on a global scale. CP Rail called them the super trains. As of 2025, these are among the last sets of these old bathtubs that are still traversing the rails. These are used only for coal trains that will remain in Canada and not interchange into the United States. In the 1970s, CP Rail would spend millions of dollars for several sets of these cars, with rotating couplers so that the unloading of trains would not require disconnecting each car. Each car could hold 4 times its weight and would often total in well over 10,000 tons of coal for each train. Many were originally delivered in a vibrant bright red paint scheme to match the action red painted locomotive fleet. Soon they would appear black as coal dust would blanket the cars. Rightfully so, CP took great pride in what they called the super train. These unit coals would consistently keep the flow of coal moving from the mines to the massive port of Roberts Bank, a 700-mile journey through some of the most grueling terrain in the world. The trip could be made in 32 hours. The massive 10,000-ton loads took only 4 hours to unload at port with the automatic technology. The loading at the mine, the trip, and unloading at the port would only take 3 days. While in today's era it seems like common practice, CP's unit train was truly a marvel for the Canadian railroad industry. With the days of these gondolas numbered before it's time to meet the scrapper's torch, we are currently in an era that marks the final days of the super train. Around a decade after the construction was complete for the Canadian Transcontinental Railroad, the Canadian Pacific would begin construction on an alternate route along Crowsnest Pass to alleviate traffic when needed. While a less formidable opponent than the grades of the Mountain and Laggan subs, this trip added several hundred miles to the journey. The Canadian Pacific would also want access to the mineral-filled mountains of British Columbia. In order to acquire funding for the route, the CPR and Canadian government would negotiate an agreement. In exchange of millions of dollars in fundings, the railway would agree to haul the grain of farmers for heavily reduced rates. They called it the Crow rate. During its creation, the agreement was intended to last forever, but nothing ever lasts that long. The cost of transporting at this lower rate would be detrimental compared to the revenue gained. In the 1980s, the Western Grain Transportation Act was introduced. This would allow the railway to increase transportation rates, but only limited to 10% more of the world price of grain. The mid-90s would come along, and with it came a new Canadian government. This administration would introduce a one-time payment act called the Western Grain Transition Payment Program. This one-time payment to grain farmers would serve the purpose to assist in the transition of rates. After 98 years, the Crow rate would be no more. Despite the removal of the considerably lower grain rates, to this day grain is one of the most common commodities shipped along the Crowsnest Sub, as well as the entirety of the CPKC system. Right on the tail of 816 is Grain Train 318. This eastbound grain is hauling empty hoppers from the Union Pacific Interchange in Eastport, Idaho. This subdivision is operated through OCS, or Occupancy Control System. It is very similar to the United States practice of track warrant control. Due to the line being dark territory, trains can follow closer behind one another compared to a line guarded by signals. The train on the point is in constant communication with the ones following it. As the tail end of one passes by, it isn't uncommon to see the headlights of the next in the distance. As mentioned earlier, you can find several grain elevators still standing in Alberta, such as this one in Fort Macleod. There was once 4 active elevators here. While a modern one still is in operation a short distance from here, this is the only classic elevator that remains. Albeit faded, the paint for the Alberta Wheat Pool Company can still be seen withering away. As Train 318 passes through Fort Macleod, only the old saying comes to mind: time marches on. Just miles from Kipp Yard outside of Lethbridge, both of our eastbound crews are nearly at the end of their trips. We would leapfrog ahead of both the 816 and 318 in the hamlet of Monarch. Kipp Yard can be a busy terminal at times, with trains arriving and departing in every direction throughout the day. With an impressive locomotive facility, we spot one of the 25 SD40-2Fs, a variant of the SD40 locomotive featuring a wide cab and a cow body, often referred to as barns by rail fans. Not far from Kipp Yard, Lethbridge is host to yet another marvel under the Canadian Pacific's belt, the High Level Bridge. This is along CPKC's Tabor Subdivision, which runs from here in Lethbridge to Medicine Hat. The original route that the railway chose through here proved to be more difficult than initially expected. There were several wooden trestles that were not designed for longevity, as well as several 1.2% grades. As the expiration dates of many of those bridges approached, it was decided that a new route bypassing the original would be the better option. 2 bridges would be required to cross over the Oldman River, one to the west in Monarch, and of course the much larger one here in Lethbridge. Despite the tall task that lay ahead, the new route would eliminate several curves while also considerably reducing the grades. High-standing engineer for the CPR, John Edward Schwitzer, would be tasked with overseeing the project. Schwitzer had already begun an extensive project in the mountains, the construction of the spiral tunnels to alleviate the near impossible 4.5% grades of the Big Hill. Despite already having his hands full, Schwitzer and the railway would begin construction of the viaduct in 1907. The steel for the bridge was fabricated in Ontario, bringing the need of hundreds of rail cars to deliver it to the building site. In August of 1908, the massive pillars of steel would begin to be raised by 100 workers. As progress continued, soon enough of the bridge would be completed to utilize what was called the erection traveler. Costing $100,000 to build on site, this massive crane would be utilized to place beams. In the late summer of 1909, the viaduct's construction would be complete. To this day, it is the largest railway structure in Canada and the largest of its type across the planet. It spans the length of over 1 mile, standing well over 300 feet above the riverbed. It cost $1,334,525 to construct the viaduct, well over 35 million in the current Canadian dollar. Truly, it is a testament to the innovation of the early days of the Canadian Pacific. Unit Potash Train 618 has just cleared the bridge, giving westbound Grain Train 319 permission to approach the bridge and move onwards to Kipp Yard. I truly hope that you have enjoyed watching this production on the numerous rails that can be found across southern Alberta. Of course, there is so much more to explore within the area, and we simply did not have enough time to get it all. The way we see it, that's just another reason to come back. Be sure to stay tuned for our next production as we will venture into the Rockies along CPKC's Laggan Subdivision. Until the next time, my friends, I'll be seeing you somewhere out there along the rails, and as always, thanks for watching.